right, welcome back to another episode of B2B Growth. My name is Timothy Bauer, and I'm once again here with Dylan Hay, the CEO of Hay Digital. We've been having a conversation around PPC for SaaS, and this is part 2 of that episode where we'll be doing a deeper dive into keywords and metrics and strategy. Dylan, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm super excited to be back for round 2. I think episode 1, we went into a lot of depth. And I said to you kind of pre-recording that that's something that's really important to me. I want to make sure that we're sharing information that people couldn't just find in a 2-minute Google search, right? I want to go deep and share as much actionable stuff as possible. So yeah, very excited. Looking forward to going deeper into this.
I love that. Okay, so let's turn our focus towards keywords. There are a lot of different types of keywords. There's branded keywords, generic keywords, transactional keywords, locational keywords, long-tailed, informational. What types of keywords should SaaS companies be focused on, and how should SaaS companies figure out what keywords they should be spending money on?
Yeah, really good question. So there's a few different routes to look at this, and I would say the easy answer is it depends on your budget level and on like how you decide to approach your PPC strategy. What I can do is break down some of the different use cases for different keyword match types is what they're called. So what you covered is like different keyword match types. I can cover some examples of which ones to use and when, and then also break down like what is a branded keyword versus a generic keyword, etc. If someone wants just a big long list of all the different types of keywords and match types on Google, that's something that if you just do a quick Google search for, you'll be able to find fairly easily. Now, with SaaS businesses specifically, typically when we first jump into someone's ads account, if we're doing an audit of it and trying to help them out, or we're starting a new account, we often see that the first thing people do is separate their campaigns by branded keywords and then non-branded keywords. So a branded keyword is anything related to your brand, as you would expect. And typically within SaaS, because there's a lot of competition within, like anyone listening to this running a SaaS business, you'll know that you have 3 or 4, probably even more competitors that do very similar things to you guys. So we want to make sure that we're covering our own brand, because often it's just standard practice now that people will be advertising against their competitors' keywords. So let's say I search for B2B Growth Show online right now, and we had 10 different competitors. There might be another podcast targeting that keyword because they know that they would share the same audience and be interesting to them. And this happens all of the time within SaaS. So you want to make sure you're covering yourself by having branded campaigns running. These are very cost effective. They're very low price because it's your branded keyword is something that you own. So you're always going to have the best quality scores on these. So Google will show your ads the most. So this is one thing. And then the second subset is then people have non-branded or unbranded campaigns and keywords. And those are the things like buying intent keywords, etc., things that aren't tied into your brand. So usually that's the first split that we see within ads accounts. Now, what we like to do is break down our campaigns, as I talked about in the first episode, by funnel positioning and buying intent. So if you haven't listened to that episode already, go back and check that one out. But once you've then broken down your campaigns by intent, this is when you can start playing around with what's called different match types. So the safest, if you want to call it that, the safest match type is exact match. And this is when you're telling Google, I only want to hit someone with an ad if they specifically search for this exact keyword or phrase. If they search for anything similar to it, but not exactly this, we don't want to serve our ad to them. So this is when you can be very, very like laser focused and targeted. So let's say you want to show an ad for podcast editing software. You can set exact match around podcast editing software. Only that would trigger. But then you can start to use other match types such as broad match modified. And this is when you're then saying to Google, okay, this is my keyword. But if somebody searches something broadly within this spectrum that's similar to this, also show them this ad. Now, we tend to use broad match modified match types often at the beginning of a new account when we're trying to uncover search terms that we may otherwise miss, right? So you're not always going to know everything that your potential customer is searching for. You might think they're searching for one thing, but actually lots of people are searching for something slightly similar that you would never have picked up before. So we often use broad match modified at the very beginning to kind of cast a net out there and catch these keywords that we may miss otherwise. Now, the risk with this is that you will also get lots of irrelevant search traffic as well. So you have to constantly keep an eye on the campaign and remove or add keywords to your what's called your negative list. And this is where you really need someone like an agency or someone kind of full-time focused on the account, or if you're doing it yourself, checking like once a day if you're running big broad match modified campaigns. Because to give you guys an example of this, we work with a website security software. They help people when their websites have been hacked. We launched a new campaign a couple of days ago, broad match modified campaign around WordPress hacked keywords, right? But it started to pull in lots of people searching for fix my Roblox hack. And Roblox is like a video game that's totally irrelevant to someone that's looking to fix their WordPress website. But it pulled it through because it's fix my something hack. So now we add that to the negative list. So that's one thing to bear in mind. And then there's also, when we're talking about keywords, you mentioned transactional keywords, locational keywords. Those are fairly self-explanatory. But then there's things like long tail keywords. So these are the things that are going to have lower search volume, but often higher intent. And it's things that would be very specific search terms. And that's why they're called long tail, because they're longer, right? So it's something like, how do I upload a podcast? That could be a long tail keyword. You're going to get less people searching for it, but it's fairly high intent if you match that to an ad and then a landing page and a tool that can help people upload podcasts online. So to kind of try and wrap it up a little bit, that's top level of some of the different keywords and match types. SaaS companies, in my opinion, should always focus on exact match campaigns when budget is tight, because this is where you can be ultra specific. And then broad match campaigns when you're trying to, on broad match modified campaigns, when you're trying to bring in extra people, whether it's top of funnel or identify more search terms. Of course, there's lots of other kind of avenues and routes that we could go down with that. But for the purpose of this episode right now, I think that's a good place to kind of stop with search terms and keywords, etc.
Awesome, Dylan. I love the detailed strategy explanations that you've given for all of this. Let's talk briefly about ad groups. How should SaaS companies be thinking about them, and what are the best practices?
Yeah, so just to explain how this works, there's lots of different strategies and ways of structuring a Google Ads account, right? So also I want everyone to bear in mind who's listening to this, just because I recommend to do things one way doesn't mean it's the only way that it should be done. Everyone has their own way of doing things. Now, an ad group, essentially when you think about the campaign structure, so you have the campaign, this is where everything is housed. Within the campaign, you have ad groups, and within the ad groups, you have keywords. So the keywords are for what people are specifically searching for. The ad group is what you use to kind of define a few different keywords and put them under one umbrella. And then the campaign level is what houses the ad groups. And that is what is your, let's say, you have a bottom of funnel campaign, for example. So we might have, we're using podcasts as examples a lot here because I just think it makes sense for everybody listening. One of my ad groups could be podcast software, for example. And then anyone that's searching keywords related to podcast software would be in that ad group. Then I could have an ad group related to podcast platforms, because we want to make sure that anyone searching for podcast platform related keywords, although it's very similar to podcast software, we want to have ads that are ultra specific to what someone's searching for. So for each ad group and for each keyword, we have different ads. And if you were to have all of these in one ad group, you wouldn't be able to separate out those ads and make sure that they're ultra relevant for the kind of searcher's experience, so to say. So without trying to get too technical, because it's kind of hard to show you guys exactly what I mean without having an ads account on my screen to run through with you all. That's how we look at ad groups. How you should be thinking about them is just making sure that you don't want to overload and have like one campaign that has hundreds of ad groups in it, because some people do that. They try and get very granular. And the problem often is if you don't have a high enough budget and you have hundreds of ad groups, Google will start optimizing towards what's performing best. And then there can be hundreds of different ad groups and search terms that actually just aren't getting any traffic at all. So it becomes pointless having them in the campaign. So you don't want too many, but you also don't want too little where you're so broad. So you want to do the best job that you can to group things together, but also keep it as specific as possible. So if you're running something related to software versus something related to platform, or reviews versus ratings, for example, you want to try and separate those just to make sure you can tailor the experience to the searcher's intent.
Great. And Dylan, could you give our listeners an example of like a way too hyper granular with ad groups?
Yeah, so too granular in my opinion. So some people think this is best practice and this is always changing. There's a method called SKAGS, SKAGS, which is single keyword ad groups. And this was I think this was a term coined by another pretty large, well-known ads agency. And basically that means that for every single keyword, so any search has its own ad group, right? And this works in some cases, it's definitely worked very well. But if you're trying to do a large campaign, doing single keyword ad groups doesn't necessarily make sense, because that's when you end up in the situation where you can have hundreds of ad groups and then your budget is only being spent on the first 2 or 3. And in that case, then you don't really get to do any real testing and you could be missing out on a lot of good results. So that would be, in my opinion, an example of something that's just a little bit too granular. However, in some use cases, if it's a small campaign with only a couple of ad groups, then it will make sense if you're trying to be laser focused and ultra specific. So again, it kind of depends on the funnel positioning, the intent, and how you're trying to distribute your budget within your SaaS company.
Awesome. I love that you brought up how this affects budget. I think this next question is going to be hyper relevant for our listeners. Let's talk about budgets and bidding. How should SaaS companies determine their ad budget? What do SaaS companies need to understand about PPC bidding?
Yeah, again, very good question. And this is something that comes up very frequently, as you would imagine, with people who have either never done ads before or are fairly new to this. And so for that exact reason, you'll probably start to see a pattern here. If you listen to episode 1 and episode 2, whenever there's a big question like this, we make sure we put together an in-depth, useful blog post on our website that covers this. So we have one that's called How to Calculate Your PPC Advertising Budget. So just go ahead and search for that. In this blog post, we basically break down, I think it's a six-step process for how you can calculate your budget. And we also have a cheat sheet in there too for some formulas of how to do that. But just to not drive everybody away, to make sure we keep them on this podcast, I'm going to share a few of the top level metrics, and just check that out afterwards. Don't stop this and go away. Check it out after you've listened to this. So it's really, really important to think about when you're calculating your budget. The first thing you want to do is think about what your objectives are, because that then sets the standard for how you're going to spend your budget. If you're early stage and you're hyper focused on driving conversions and nothing else, all you care about is people getting onto sales calls with your team, your budget is going to be different for somebody that has more to spend and they're concentrating on awareness campaigns as well as conversion campaigns, right? So you have to first think about what the purpose is, why you're actually advertising. So it's really important that you cover that. But then you need to start by defining your business and advertising goals. So we like to use the SMART goal, setting methodologies, making sure that your goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And that's where you start thinking, okay, are we focusing on customer acquisition, brand awareness, retention, etc.? Usually most people, they're focusing on lead generation and customer acquisition, and then secondary to that, brand awareness, and then maybe third, customer retention or trial retention. So once you've done that, you then have to understand traffic generation requirements. So you need to figure out, okay, in order to get those volume of conversions, how many people do I need to come to the website based on the data that we have available to us right now? Now, the caveat with this is that, of course, you can never really figure this out until you have ads up and running, but you can look into your Google Analytics account and see, okay, from our organic search traffic, what percentage of visitors convert to either signing up for a trial, booking onto a demo, etc. Take data like that, and from that you can figure out, okay, if I need 100 customers and let's say, or 100 trial signups, and my conversion rate from web traffic to trial signup is usually 2%, then on average you're going to need 5,000 clicks to get 100 signups potentially. This is fairly top level, right? But this is the only way to do things before you're running ads. So you figure that out. Then you want to go ahead and get an estimated CPC, an estimated cost per click. You can use a few different ways to do this. One is historical data. If you've run campaigns previously, that's the best option. But if you've never done that before, like a lot of people listening to this, you can use the Google Keyword Planner to get some estimates on CPCs. Now, the thing to bear in mind here is that, to be honest with you, the Google Keyword Planner and any other keywords tools, whether it's SEMrush, Ahrefs, something like that, they're often pretty inaccurate when it comes to what you'll actually be spending, but they give you a benchmark. So you want to figure out what the estimated CPC is. And then once you have that, you can find the maximum CPC and the average CPC. The Google Keyword Planner will tell you that. And then once you have, okay, I need to get this many clicks based on my standard conversion rates, and this is what the average CPC is, then you can start to do some calculations to do, okay, traffic needed times by average CPC equals our budget. But it's not the best way, like it's not a concrete way to set a budget, because really you can't do that until you have things up and running and you see what's actually happening. So what we recommend is that you usually do like a low range estimate and a high range estimate, and then aim for something in the middle. And then over time, usually over the first 30 days, when you're starting to collect data, then you can really make informed decisions about what your budget should be moving forward.
Wow, awesome, Dylan. What a very practical primer on budgets and bidding. And I wasn't expecting to do this, but I think it's going to be important for us to have a part 3 to this, because the next things that we're going to talk about, targeting, copywriting, ad extensions, measurement, I don't want to rush through any of that. So tune in for part 3 of the interview with Dylan Hay on PPC for SaaS. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to going in again.
Hey everybody, Logan with Sweetfish here. If you're a regular listener of B2B Growth, you know that I'm one of the co-hosts of this show, but you may not know that I also head up the sales team here at Sweetfish. So for those of you in sales or sales ops, I wanted to take a second to share something that's made us insanely more efficient lately. Our team has been using LeadIQ for the past few months, and what used to take us 4 hours gathering contact data now takes us only 1. We're 75% more efficient, we're able to move faster with outbound prospecting, and organizing our campaigns is so much easier than before. I'd highly suggest you guys check out LeadIQ as well. You can check them out at leadiq.com. That's LEADIQ.com.